"I read your mind," said the girl. The judge laughed, and then all his crimes were exposed by her. This story follows 8-year-old Amara Fields, a gifted black girl whose mysterious knowing reveals hidden truths. When her grandmother's home is threatened by a corrupt landlord, Amara's power collides with housing court injustice, forcing her to expose Judge Kenneth Monroe's darkest crime and ignite a battle that could topple an entire system built on silence. Amara's world is small. A 2-room duplex on Halsey Street, the stoop, where she recites spelling words, the corner grocery, where Mr. Tran slips her bruised apples. Lorraine Fields. Her grandmother works 2 jobs, motel rooms at dawn, ironing at dusk, and still braids Amara's hair each night, while humming hymns older than the city. Their rhythm breaks the moment a thick white envelope arrives. Rent adjustment. 92% increase in 30 days. Lorraine's laugh is a single stunned bark. "Developers want the block," she mutters, fingers trembling. The knowing prickles behind Amara's eyes like static. Downtown, they meet Janelle Pierce at Legal Aid. Young Sharp already tired of losing. Pierce explains that she'll file an injunction, but the case will land before Judge Kenneth Monroe. At the name, Amara's stomach knots. That night she dreams in snapshots, moonlight shimmering on river water, an oak tree, a woman's scream, cut short dirt, piling into a hole. She wakes with the sheet clenched in her fists. School offers no refuge. Classmates hiss witch under their breath. Desks slide away when she sits. During a math drill, another vision strikes Monroe younger, sweat-slicked, shoving a shovel into soft earth. A silver necklace flashes in his palm. Amara's pencil snaps. The teacher scolds her for daydreaming. 2 days before court, Lorraine sorts evidence at the kitchen table, photos of mold receipts for ignored repairs. "He's not just unfair," Amara whispers, voice tight. "He's dangerous." Lorraine cups her face. "Truth is all we carry, baby. The rest is God's fight." The courthouse smells of wax and worry. Security eyes them like contraband. Ms. Pierce meets them outside courtroom 4, jaw clenched. Monroe runs a fast docket. "Don't flinch when he cuts me off." Judge Monroe enters, tall, iron-gray hair, stare like winter stone. He skims Lorraine's file with visible annoyance. Pierce cites housing codes. Monroe interrupts, suggesting Lorraine seek cheaper neighborhoods. He claims he never received her maintenance photos, though Pierce filed them yesterday. Lorraine's knuckles whiten. Monroe raises his gavel to rule. Amara stands. Her voice is steady, eerie. "Did Deidre Lane beg before you swung the shovel?" Judge Wood creaks. Gasps ripple through the gallery. Monroe pales. "Child sit, or be removed." Amara's words pour out unstoppable, the oak by the river, the midnight digging the necklace with a blue stone hidden in his desk's false bottom. The bailiff hesitates, unnerved. Monroe slams his gavel, but it thuds uselessly. He adjourns in panic, vanishing through a private door. Reporters surge forward. Ms. Pierce grips Amara's shoulders, torn between terror and dawning strategy. Lorraine gathers her granddaughter, whispering a prayer, equal parts fear and pride. Outside, storm clouds roll over Eastboro. The knowing hums like live wire in Amara's chest. Truth has broken its chains, and nothing, not even a judge's robe, can shove it back underground. Rain slashed sideways as Lorraine half-dragged Amara down the courthouse steps, reporters shouting questions that blurred into the storm. Janelle Pierce kept pace, shielding the girl with her briefcase like a riot shield. At the curb, a patrol cruiser idled. The driver, a deputy Monroe had likely handpicked, stared at them through fogged glass until Pierce steered Lorraine toward the bus shelter instead. Amara felt the deputy's gaze like a nail in her spine, but the knowing pulsed steadier, whispering, "Keep moving." By the time they reached Halsey Street, an unmarked black SUV sat opposite their duplex, engine ticking. Its headlights flashed, once, then went dark. Lorraine locked the door, lowered the blinds, and powered off every light. Pierce dialed her office. "We need an emergency injunction to preserve evidence," she said, voice tight. "Monroe will scrub his chambers tonight." Amara curled on the couch, heart-drumming visions flickering. Monroe pacing a paneled study liquor glass, trembling, opening a desk drawer to touch a silver necklace, as though it could reassure him that secrets still obeyed. Across town, Detective Leon Harris replayed the viral courthouse clip on his phone. He'd seen Monroe humiliate tenants for years. He'd never seen the judge lose control. Deidre Lane, he mouthed, dredging up a case file long since purged from the digital index. He logged into the archive. Access denied. Next, he walked downstairs to records requested the microfilm. The clerk, a man whose brother owed Monroe a favor, shrugged, said the spool was misplaced. Harris felt a chill of déjà vu. Evidence always vanished around Monroe. At dawn, Lorraine left for the motel umbrella useless against the sheets of rain. She returned an hour later, eyes red. "Budget cuts," she said flatly, and placed her uniform on the table. The phone rang again and again, a TV producer dangling money for an exclusive. Amara's school principal suggesting a wellness break. Child Protective Services announcing a visit to assess possible delusions induced by adult legal stress. Pierce documented every call, building a timeline of retaliation. Meanwhile, Monroe sat in his darkened study tie, loosened stormlight strobing across bookshelves. He phoned Victor Raines, the developer bankrolling his campaign debt, and spat, "Find me a psychiatrist who'll certify the girl as unstable. I want it filed by morning." When Raines warned that cameras were everywhere, now Monroe slammed the receiver. The oak tree memory he'd buried under law books and whiskey clawed upward, Deidre's final gasp, soil thudding on silk. He poured another drink, hands shaking so badly half the bourbon sloshed onto the desk. For the first time in 20 years, the judge wondered whether the robe could still shield him. Detective Harris, stonewalled inside the department, drove to the shuttered Herald building, where retirees met for dominoes. There, he found Miriam Cho, former city editor, her hearing aid whistling. Mention of Deidre Lane made her flinch. She slid him a yellowed storage unit receipt. Deidre said, "If anything happens to me, truth's in box 12. I was too scared to look. Harris tucked the slip into his wallet, aware a line had been crossed. At dusk, the SUV repositioned beside the duplex, headlights off. Lorraine dialed 911. The dispatcher promised a patrol, but none came. Inside, Amara gripped her grandmother's hand. The knowing opened wide. Monroe hunched over his desk, necklace clutched tight, whispering to a ghost no one else could see. "They're coming for us," Amara said, voice small. Lorraine straightened. "Then we'll be ready." Lightning cracked overhead. Every bulb in the house flickered. Across town, Monroe's study went dark as well. In that electric void, he heard Deidre's voice, soft, relentless, asking if he'd ever dig deep enough to hide from himself. He pressed his palms to his ears and screamed, but the storm swallowed the sound, and the necklace glowed cold between his trembling fingers. Monroe hurled the necklace across the room, but it only skittered beneath a bookcase and kept shining in the dark. He wanted the storm to drown Deidre's whisper, yet each thunderclap seemed to carry her name. When the power returned a few minutes later, he yanked open the curtains, as if daylight alone could silence what he'd buried. It did not. By sunrise, his eyes were red, and his resolve was brittle enough to splinter. Across town, Lorraine hadn't slept. She brewed coffee while Amara dozed beside the radio, small fists balled under her chin. When lightning finally gave way to a gray drizzle, headlights cut through the wet dawn. Ms. Pierce stepped inside Skirt's damp briefcase, stuffed with motions. Monroe filed an emergency order declaring Amara a material witness in contempt, she said. He's angling to isolate her before anyone corroborates her story. Lorraine's shoulders squared. Then, we outrun him. Detective Harris had the same idea. 2 counties over, he jimmied the rusted lock on storage unit 12. Inside, dust floated like spores over cardboard towers labeled Lane. He slit the first box and found photographs Monroe in a lakeside gazebo, accepting envelopes from developer Victor Raines. Monroe's signature on eviction writs, dated a week later. A slim recorder lay at the bottom, tape wound to the leader. Harris pocketed everything and drove straight to meet Pierce at a diner, ignoring 3 calls from his captain en route. While they compared notes, Pierce's phone buzzed with an unknown number. A flat male voice said, "Drop the girl at child services by noon, or your bar license disappears." Pierce hung up and exhaled slowly. "He's panicking," Harris said. "Panicked people make mistakes. We need the body." Amara's vision of the oak returned to Pierce's mind. Riverbend blue dress, 1 shoe. She nodded. "We'll dig tonight." Monroe had reached the same conclusion from the opposite direction. He summoned Raines to his house, palms twitching. "I want that site bulldozed, understand?" "Say it's erosion control." Raines balked. Heavy machinery near a river would draw permits, cameras, questions. Monroe slammed a fist on his desk, toppling a framed commendation. "I am running out of time." Raines left without promising anything, but outside he called a contractor who owed him a favor. At noon, 2 Child Protective Services agents knocked on Lorraine's door, flanked by a uniformed officer unfamiliar to the neighborhood. Lorraine opened with Pierce on speakerphone. The lead agent cited concerns of psychological harm. Before Lorraine could answer, Amara stepped forward, voice clear. "Judge Monroe sent you. Tell him the truth is already walking." The officer shifted uneasily. The agents withdrew, muttering about due process. That evening, Harris borrowed a cadaver dog from a trusted handler under pretense of training drills. Pierce arranged for Sheriff Delgado in the neighboring county to meet them. Delgado disliked Monroe's politics and loved jurisdictional one-upmanship. Rain had swollen the river to a brown roar when the small convoy reached the oak. Amara climbed out first barefoot in the mud and walked straight to a mossy patch 6 paces from the trunk. "Here," she whispered. The dog signaled within seconds, pawing and barking. Harris drove in a survey stake, shot location photos, then hustled everyone back to the vehicles. Delgado would file for a warrant at dawn, quietly, before Monroe caught wind. As they pulled away, headlights flashed behind them, the black SUV. It tailed them until they crossed the county line, then veered off tires, spitting gravel. Monroe, meanwhile, sat alone again, phone silent, allies hesitant. He poured another drink, but found the bottle empty. In its place, as though materializing from shadow, lay the silver necklace. He hadn't retrieved it. He hadn't even looked for it. Yet there it was, stone glinting like an eye that never blinks. Monroe's breath hitched. Deidre's whisper was louder now, woven through the ticking clock. "They're coming, Ken. Every shovel of dirt you moved is coming back." He staggered to the window. Blue lights pulsed on a distant ridge, routine traffic stop, maybe, or a portent. Either way, he felt the ground giving way beneath 40 years of carefully laid foundations. In that hollowing moment, the judge understood something he had never allowed: a single truth spoken by a child can split bedrock. And by the time the sun rose over Eastboro, again bedrock would start to crack. Dawn pried open the sky exactly as Monroe had feared, and Eastboro awakened to the first hairline fractures in his bedrock. Sheriff Delgado's warrant, signed while night mist still clung to the cornfields, authorized a full forensic dig at the oak by 8:30 a.m. By 9, state crime scene vans were bumping down the gravel access road. Detective Harris, grim with purpose, guided the lead technician to the survey stake he'd driven only hours earlier. Cadaver dog Mako whined, pawing the soil, as if impatient for justice to step into daylight. News traveled faster than the backhoe's hydraulic arm. A freelance drone operator, notified by an anonymous text, hovered above the bend, live streaming to local affiliates. Monroe saw the footage on his kitchen television, coffee sloshing over his trembling hand as the first scoop of earth lifted. He switched channels. Every network showed the same silent feed of red clay rising like an accusation. At the duplex on Halsey Lorraine, Amara and Janelle Pierce watched too. The screen displayed a blur of technicians in Tyvek suits. Amara pressed her fingers to the glass, whispering, "She's almost home." Pierce's phone lit with messages: reporters, state investigators, 2 congressmen's aides, smelling political blood. She ignored them, dialed the clerk's office instead. File motion to impound all of Judge Monroe's personal effects, she instructed. Claim possible evidence. The clerk hesitated until Pierce added, "The FBI is 5 minutes from calling you themselves." Paperwork moved. Back at the dig shovels replaced machinery for the final inches. A technician knelt, brushed dirt aside, and froze. Blue fabric. Camera shutters clicked like cicadas. An evidence flag bloomed. Then, another the missing shoe. Harris inhaled slowly. Every detail Amara had spoken was manifesting like a conjured script. Across town, Monroe paced suit jacket, discarded phone unanswered. He contemplated flight private airstrip Cayman account, but exit plans felt flimsy under the drone's unblinking eye. When his doorbell finally rang, he nearly welcomed the distraction until he saw Victor Raines on the stoop, jaw tight. "They found remains, Ken. Our attorneys are shredding documents. You need to resign and take the fall alone." Monroe laughed a brittle, glassy sound. "You'll hang with me." Raines didn't flinch. "Only if you talk. And you won't live that long." He left Monroe staring at the necklace, still inexplicably perched on the foyer table, glimmering like gilt-made metal. By noon, Delgado confirmed human remains and halted the dig to await the state medical examiner. Reporters pressed against the tape, shouting questions Harris could finally half-answer. Unidentified female cold case lead judge, under scrutiny. He refused further comment, but the narrative was unstoppable. Social media blew up with side-by-side photos of Monroe in his robe, and the excavation pit tagged Gishi judging the judge. Lorraine's phone erupted next, her former employer begging her to return the landlord's attorney offering to negotiate. She hung up on both. A pastor from New Hope Baptist dropped off groceries and stationed congregants outside as an informal security watch. Community solidarity hardened into a shield no SUV could penetrate. Inside the courthouse, clerks whispered as federal marshals sealed Monroe's chambers. An IT specialist cloned his hard drive. Agents photographed the desk's false drawer before removing the silver and blue necklace in an evidence bag. One marshal muttered, "Kid called it to the inch." The statement spread, morphing into folklore before sunset. Monroe, breath, sour with panic, drove aimlessly, until blue lights blossomed in his rearview, state troopers setting up a perimeter. He veered toward the bus station, but TV crews lounged there, now waiting. Cornered by his own routines, he sped home, tires squealing. In the driveway, he caught his reflection in the windshield robe, gone visage sagging. Just another suspect afraid of handcuffs. Deidre's whisper curled around his ears. "Truth splits bedrock, Ken." Twilight settled purple over Eastboro as the medical examiner's van eased away from the oak. Harris watched it go, absently thumbing the recorder he'd found in storage unit 12. He hadn't played it yet. Part of him feared the voice trapped inside might change everything again. But tomorrow, it would become evidence, another fracture widening the fault beneath Monroe's empire. At the duplex, Amara finally slept, cheek against Lorraine's lap. The television muted Pierce, crafted affidavits under a dim lamp. Lorraine smoothed her granddaughter's hair and whispered storms passing baby. Outside, neighbors kept vigil, lawn chairs lining the sidewalk like sentries. And, in a darkened house across town, Kenneth Monroe sat alone, porch light off, heartbeat hammering in his ears, waiting for the inevitable knock that would shatter the last illusion of power he had left. The knock finally came just after midnight, a brisk rap, authoritative, yet muted, as if its bearer wished to keep the neighborhood asleep. Monroe snapped upright, robe, belted tight, sweat wringing his collar. When he cracked the door, 2 uniformed officers stood beneath the porch eave. The older one spoke first. "Judge Headquarters asked us to escort you downtown for your safety." His gaze flicked toward the idling cruiser, then to the cluster of phone cameras glinting across the street. Neighbors had been waiting. Monroe hesitated, sensing a trap, yet clinging to authority's mask. "Give me 5 minutes," he said. Upstairs, he swapped slippers for polished shoes, stuffed a passport and cash into an inside pocket, then paused before the desk. The drawer where the necklace had lain was empty, evidence bagged by marshals hours earlier. Its absence felt like a missing tooth. He descended the stairs and stepped into the humid night. The cruiser rolled 2 blocks before flashing lights bloomed behind it, state troopers. The driver cursed under his breath. Monroe's pulse pounded. A trooper approached, hand lightly on his holster. "Step out, Your Honor." The title dripped irony. Phones recorded every second as Monroe emerged, hands raised. Questions flew. Did you kill Deidre Lane? What about the evictions? He tried to keep his face blank, but a muscle in his cheek twitched. Then someone shouted monster, and for the first time in 40 years, Kenneth Monroe felt genuinely powerless. At the duplex, Lorraine woke to a news alert: breaking Judge Monroe taken into custody. She nudged Amara, who murmured, "The necklace is gone. She's almost free." Janelle Pierce, already dressed, opened her laptop. "We file civil action today," she said. "Strike while the outrage is fresh." Detective Harris spent dawn inside a conference room with Sheriff Delgado and an FBI liaison playing the tape from Deidre's recorder. Monroe's voice crackled, threat slurs, an admission he'd clean up this town by any means. The agent's eyes hardened. "I'll have a lake house warrant signed within the hour." Harris exhaled. Another stone removed from Monroe's crumbling wall. By mid-morning, Monroe sat in an interrogation suite, wrists cuffed. He demanded counsel. A public defender arrived stunned to meet a man who'd once belittled her motions from the bench. She advised silence, but Monroe's ego leaked through cracks. "This is a witch hunt," he hissed. "That child is unstable." Across the table, the prosecutor slid a photograph, the bluestone necklace beside Deidre's shoe. Another drone footage of the oak. "Evidence hunts witches," she replied. Outside, crowds swelled. Eastborough's black residents marched with hand-drawn signs, "We told you," while some of Monroe's longtime supporters jeered, clinging to the myth of his righteousness. National outlets parked satellite trucks along Court Street. Pundits debated systemic rot versus individual sin. CPS attempted a second visit to Lorraine's home, but found a wall of neighbors, pastors, and teachers documenting every badge number. The agents retreated. "Community armor," Pierce said, watching through the window. She dialed a state senator, now championing tenant protections. Momentum was currency, and she meant to spend it. 20 miles upriver, deputies reached the ramshackle fishing cabin Amara had described. Earl Thompson, 83, weathered by sun and regret, opened the door journal already in hand. "Kept it all these years," he said, voice shaking as he tapped the penciled license plate, KJM 042. Deputies recorded his statement, promising protection. Earl just nodded. "About time somebody listened to that girl." Near sunset, FBI evidence teams swept through Monroe's lake house. Floorboards yielded sealed envelopes, suppressed police reports, cashier's check stubs to shell companies, a cache of files stamped exculpatory. Each artifact was cataloged, photographed, boxed, the paperwork of ruin. In the county jail, news of the raid reached Monroe. He slammed both fists against the plexiglass knuckles, blooming red. Guards restrained him as he shouted incoherently about ungrateful thugs and property values. A phone camera captured the tirade. Within hours, the clip circulated under the hashtag Josh Order in his court. Back on Halsey, Amara watched the viral video, eyes unreadable. Lorraine asked if the knowing felt quieter. "Not yet," Amara whispered, "but it will when everyone sees what he buried besides Deidre." She touched her grandmother's hand, then closed her eyes, as if listening for a final echo. Across town, streetlights blinked on outside the courthouse, now draped in police tape. Reporters signed off their live hits, promising more revelations tomorrow, warrants, tapes, hidden files. And though night settled heavy over Eastborough, the fractures Monroe had feared widened into visible fault lines, spreading under every building he once ruled, ensuring that by dawn, nothing about power or justice in the city would ever look the same again. Dawn arrived to find every mailbox in Eastborough carrying the same front-page headline, "Judge Monroe, charged with murder, civil rights violations." Below it, a photo of cardboard evidence crates being wheeled from his lake house, like coffins of paperwork. The city's hum felt different, part anticipation, part reckoning. At the legal aid office, Janelle Pierce set 3 new motions on the copier, her jaw still tight from lack of sleep. One sought class action status for tenants Monroe had evicted. The second demanded immediate review of every criminal conviction he had signed. The third asked the court to freeze assets tied to his shell companies until restitution could be paid. Strike while the outrage is fresh. She repeated stapler snapping like a metronome. Lorraine and Amara spent the morning in the church basement, where volunteers fielded calls from national reporters. Amara sat cross-legged on a folding chair, sketching the oak tree over and over, each version smaller than the last. "She's fading," Amara murmured, meaning Deidre's voice inside her mind. Lorraine squeezed her shoulder. "Good," she said, though part of her wondered what silence would feel like after living beside a miracle. Across town, Detective Leon Harris watched an FBI tech release the first batch of scanned documents from Monroe's hidden files. Case after case showed exculpatory evidence stamped, received, then scrawled over with a red X. Harris called 7 defense attorneys in succession. 6 men already in prison would be released before sundown. Each lawyer wept or cursed softly, decades of frustration cracking into relief. Inside county jail, Monroe sat alone in a glass-walled interview room, awaiting arraignment. The public defender laid out the government's evidence: DNA from Deidre's bracelet. The recorder, Earl Thompson's statement bank, transfers the necklace. "They want life without parole," she said flatly. Monroe stared at his own reflection in the glass. The robe was gone, but he still tried to summon its gravity. "It's all circumstantial," he muttered. "One child's fantasy." The lawyer slid a still frame from the excavation blue dress, single-shoe necklace, identical to the one in evidence. "Children don't bury bodies, Judge." At noon, the arraignment streamed live. Prosecutor Ellis Vaughn read 23 counts. Monroe pleaded not guilty, voice trembling. When Vaughn argued that the defendant had used power to intimidate witnesses and destroy records, the presiding judge, imported from another district, denied bail. Cameras caught Monroe's jaw, slackening shoulders, curling inward, as if the walls themselves were shrinking. Outside the courthouse, Reverend Cole addressed a crowd of hundreds. "Justice isn't a verdict," he declared. "It's what we build after the verdict." Petitions circulated demanding an independent commission on judicial bias. City council members, suddenly attentive, scheduled an emergency session. That evening, while reporters filed stand-ups under floodlights, Pierce arrived at the courthouse archives with Harris and 2 marshals. Amara's latest drawing showed a basement door she'd never seen in person. Harris found it behind a filing cabinet on sub-level 2. Inside, damp boxes slumped against concrete. A flashlight beam revealed handwritten labels: suppressed exhibits, 2007, sealed depositions, 2011. Harris exhaled hard. He didn't just bend the law, he said. He buried it. The marshals cataloged everything. Pierce emailed an inventory to the state bar before midnight. When Lorraine tucked Amara into a cot, back at the church, the girl whispered, "He's almost empty inside now. His secrets are leaving him." Lorraine asked if the knowing still buzzed. Amara pressed a palm to her chest, considering. Quiet like the house after guests go home. In his cell, Monroe tried to pray, but found only silence. Deidre's voice was gone. In its place echoed the chant of protesters outside, rising with the summer dusk. No more silent courts. He pressed his hands over his ears, but sound slipped between his fingers. The trial date was set for 6 weeks hence. Evidence crates multiplied, bailiffs rehearsed courtroom seating, and the city braced for crowds larger than any parade in its history. Truth had split the bedrock. Part 7 would decide how deep the fissure would run. Truth had split the bedrock. Now the fissure widened with every tick of the courtroom clock. 6 sweltering weeks after Monroe's arraignment, Eastborough's restored courthouse, newly fitted with security glass, and rows of national media, opened its heavy oak doors to the trial that would decide whether a judge could outrun the justice he once wielded like a weapon. Spectators queued before dawn, Some carried candles for Deidre Lane, others handwritten lists of relatives whose cases Monroe had tainted. Inside, prosecutors stacked evidence crates 2 stories high, each box a splinter pried from the old regime. Monroe entered in chains disguised by a Navy suit his lawyer had pressed hours earlier. The cameras still found the shackles at his ankles. Jurors studied him, the way one inspects a cracked statue, wondering if the pieces could ever suggest the former shape of honor. Opening statements painted 2 rival portraits, the states of a man who forged a throne from buried bodies and broken families, the defenses of a stern patriot, maligned by gossip, and a child's wild imagination. But imagination rarely leaves DNA on a bracelet clasp, nor hides tape recorders under floorboards. The prosecution built momentum like gathering thunder. Earl Thompson hobbled to the stand, first voice, trembling, but clear as he named Monroe beneath oath and fluorescent lights. Forensic analysts followed, explaining soil composition, trace fibers, timestamps. Each fact struck Monroe like a hammer tap against porcelain. When Detective Harris played Deidre's recorder, the gallery fell into a hush, so complete the tape's hiss resembled wind through graveyard grass. The judge's voice from 2 decades past snarled promises of silence. Deidre's steadier tone answered that truth was patient. 4 days in the state called Amara Fields. She wore a simple yellow dress, her hair braided in the church basement that morning by Lorraine's careful hands. She climbed into the witness chair, feet dangling, and met Monroe's gaze with the calm of someone who has already seen the ending. Under direct examination, she recounted the visions exactly once. No embellishment, no theatrics, just a child describing weather. She explained how the knowing pressed images into her mind until she spoke them aloud, and how the pictures had quieted when Deidre's body saw daylight. The defense tried to shake her. They posited coaching community hysteria, a search engine trail. Amara only said search engines didn't plant the necklace in his desk. At that, even the stenographer paused, fingers hovering above keys. Monroe insisted on testifying against counsel's advice, believing he could resurrect the robe with rhetoric. On the stand, he began measured, denouncing anti-property radicals and occult superstition. But Vaughn cross-examined patiently, producing document after document, eviction patterns, forged signatures, emails to developers. The mask slipped when Vaughn asked whether Monroe considered Eastborough's black tenants fully American. The former judge's lips twitched, then split. A stream of resentment, polished over years of private chambers, poured into public record references to urban blight, those people crime-breeding grounds. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The moment sealed the prosecution's case more tightly than any forensic chart. Deliberation lasted 4 hours. A clerk read 23 guilty verdicts, each punctuated by a collective exhale from the crowd beyond the courthouse steps. Sentencing followed a week later. The presiding judge spoke of betrayal deeper than theft or violence, a corrosion of the civic soul. Life without parole for murder, plus 150 years for corruption and civil rights violations, ensuring the robe would never again brush free air. When guards led Monroe away, he glanced once toward the window. Protesters outside were singing a hymn older than the city. The melody chased him down the corridor, like judgment with wings. The verdict triggered a wave of restoration. An emergency commission reviewed 412 of Monroe's criminal cases. Within months, 87 wrongfully convicted defendants walked free. Property deeds nullified under fraudulent evictions reverted to longtime occupants. Lorraine's rent notice was formally voided. The deed transferred to a community trust funded by the auction of Monroe's Lake House. City Council passed the Eastborough Fair Housing Act, and the courthouse was renamed after Deidre Lane, in a twilight ceremony lit by 1,000 candles held aloft like stars. On the day the new brass plaque was unveiled, Amara stood beside Detective Harris and Janelle Pierce, her small hand squeezing Lorraine's. Reporters begged for interviews. She declined them all. That night on their porch, Lorraine asked if the knowing felt different now. Amara listened to the summer crickets, to the distant echo of church bells, and smiled. "It's quiet," she said. "But if someone else starts hiding the truth, I think it'll wake up again. Lorraine nodded, both relieved and humbled by the possibility. Eastborough's skyline did not change overnight, yet the light around it seemed altered clearer, as though the air itself had laid down a burden. And while buildings like people retained scars of former foundations, fresh mortar filled the cracks where bedrock had shattered. In that renewed city, a child returned to her third-grade classroom. A grandmother slept without fear of eviction. And the song of justice, long muted, rose day after day, carried on voices unafraid to speak.